Hello, my dear friends. Take a slow breath and let the day soften. Tonight, we are not rushing anywhere. We are simply drifting back through time, far beyond modern streets and busy minds, to a world where life moved slowly and quietly. Tonight's story is about a plant that has been with humans for a very long time, long before modern names, modern laws, or modern habits existed. This is a gentle history, not a lesson, not a guide, just a calm walk through the past. We are exploring when people first encountered this plant and how it quietly entered human life. Imagine you are standing in the ancient world, thousands of years ago. There are no cities as we know them today, no electricity, no noise that never stops. People live close to the land. They farm, they herd animals, they gather plants, and they watch the seasons carefully. Every plant has value. Some are food, some are fiber, some are medicine. Knowledge passes slowly from one generation to the next, through observation rather than books. In this world, humans do not search for excitement. They search for balance, survival, and calm. Long before anyone thought about smoking anything, humans were already familiar with the cannabis plant. Archaeological evidence shows that this plant was growing naturally across large parts of Central Asia. People did not discover it suddenly. They lived alongside it. They learned its properties slowly through daily contact. The seeds were useful. The fibers were strong. The plant became part of everyday life in small, practical ways. At this early stage, there was no idea of recreation or escape. There was only usefulness and curiosity. As ancient societies grew, people began to notice that some plants affected the body and mind in subtle ways. This was not unusual. Many plants were observed carefully. Some made people sleepy. Some eased pain. Some changed perception gently. These effects were not seen as entertainment. They were seen as part of nature's design. In many early cultures, altered states were connected to rest, ritual, or quiet reflection, rather than excitement. Evidence suggests that as early as several thousand years ago, people in regions like Central Asia and parts of China were using cannabis in controlled, ceremonial contexts. Archaeologists have found traces of burned cannabis in ancient burial sites, suggesting that smoke was sometimes used during rituals connected to death, memory, or the spirit world. These were not loud or chaotic events. They were calm, serious moments, often linked to honoring the dead or connecting with ancestors. Smoke in many ancient cultures symbolized a bridge between the physical world and something beyond it. It is important to understand how different this world was from ours. Life was slower. Nights were dark and long. People sat around fires in silence. When smoke filled the air, it was already familiar. Wood smoke, herb smoke, incense, and ritual fires were part of everyday life. In this environment, the use of plant smoke did not stand out as strange or rebellious. It blended naturally into existing customs. Over time, knowledge traveled along trade routes. People moved, goods moved, stories moved. The cannabis plant traveled with traders, healers, and travelers. It spread slowly into new regions, including parts of India, the Middle East, and later Africa. Each culture encountered the plant in its own way and interpreted it through its own beliefs. Some saw it as medicine. Some saw it as a sacred plant. Some simply observed its effects without assigning strong meaning at all. There was no single moment when people started smoking weed in the way we imagine today. There was no beginning point marked by rebellion or pleasure. Instead, there was a long, gradual relationship between humans and a plant, shaped by environment, belief, and need. The idea of smoking as a casual habit would come much later. In these early times, the use of cannabis smoke was rare, intentional, and often tied to quiet moments rather than daily life. As the night grows quieter now, let this ancient world settle in your mind. Fires crackle softly. The air is still. People move slowly, guided by tradition rather than impulse. In the next part, we will gently explore how different ancient cultures understood this plant and how its meaning slowly changed as societies became more complex. For now, remain still. Let the quiet deepen. Let rest continue in its own time. Long before smoking was ever imagined, long before fire was used in careful ways, humans were already living beside this plant without fully naming it or defining it. Imagine very early human communities moving slowly across open land, forests, and river valleys. They gathered plants for food, fibers, and medicine, learning through quiet observation what each plant could offer. Cannabis was simply one of many plants growing naturally, unnoticed at first, blending into the background of daily life. No one was seeking escape or altered states. Life itself was already intense, physical, and demanding. Over time, people noticed patterns. They noticed that some plants soothed pain, some calmed the body, and some made sleep come more easily. Cannabis was not approached with excitement or curiosity in the way modern people imagine. It was approached slowly, cautiously, like all unfamiliar things in the ancient world. Small experiments happened quietly. Leaves were touched, seeds were eaten, fibers were tested. The relationship formed over generations, not moments. In these early societies, knowledge moved slowly from elders to the young. If a plant caused discomfort, it was avoided. If it brought calm or relief, it was remembered. Cannabis began to gain quiet recognition not because it made people feel different, but because it helped the body feel more balanced. Some noticed that certain preparations made the mind feel softer and less tense, especially after long days of physical work. This was not seen as getting high. It was seen as returning the body to a more natural state of rest. At this stage in history, there was no separation between medicine, ritual, and daily life. Everything blended together. Plants were part of survival, healing, and spiritual understanding. Cannabis slowly entered this shared space. It was not special or forbidden. It was simply another tool offered by the land. People did not smoke it yet. They used it in teas, poultices, and simple mixtures, often combined with other plants. Fire itself was still something treated with respect. Burning plants intentionally for inhalation came much later. Early humans were cautious around smoke. Smoke was connected to danger, wildfires, and suffocation. Breathing it intentionally was not common. Instead, cannabis was experienced through the body first, through digestion and touch, long before the lungs were involved. As communities settled and agriculture slowly developed, humans began growing plants intentionally. Cannabis was easy to grow, resilient, and useful in many ways. Its fibers were strong. Its seeds were nutritious. Its leaves had calming effects. This made it valuable even without any intoxicating purpose. Many early cultures valued cannabis primarily as a practical plant, not a mind-altering one. As you imagine this time, notice how calm and ordinary everything feels. There is no rebellion here, no escape, no excess, just humans slowly learning from their environment. Cannabis did not arrive suddenly in human history. It drifted in quietly, like many other plants, becoming familiar over centuries rather than celebrated or feared. As the night grows quiet, let us pause here for a moment. Let the image of early humans and open land soften in your mind. In the next part, we will gently move forward in time, toward the first civilizations, where ritual, belief, and smoke slowly began to meet. For now, remain still. Let your breathing stay slow. Let rest continue gently in its own time. As cannabis slowly spread across different regions of the ancient world, it did not arrive with noise or excitement. It moved quietly, carried by travelers, traders, and migrating communities. In many places, cannabis became part of daily life long before it was ever associated with recreation. People did not think of it as something unusual. It was simply another plant, growing among others, offering fibers, seeds, oils, and calming effects that fit naturally into slow, ancient rhythms. Life moved gently, and so did the use of cannabis. In some early societies, cannabis was closely connected to ritual and belief, not in dramatic or intense ways, but in calm and symbolic ones. It was sometimes burned gently during ceremonies, its soft smoke drifting upward as people sat quietly together. These moments were not about escaping reality. They were about slowing down, reflecting, and feeling connected to the world around them. The plant was respected, not feared, and never rushed. Its effects were subtle, blending into long nights of storytelling, prayer, or silent thought. Cannabis also became part of early medicine, though ancient people did not separate medicine from daily life the way we do today. If something eased pain, calmed the mind, or helped the body rest, it was simply considered helpful. Healers and midwives used cannabis carefully, often mixed with other herbs, oils, or warm drinks. There were no exact doses or strict rules. Knowledge passed slowly, through observation and experience, from one generation to the next. Everything was gentle, patient, and grounded in routine. In agricultural communities, cannabis was often grown alongside food crops. People knew its value beyond any effect on the mind. The fibers were strong, the seeds were nourishing, the oil was useful. Because of this, the plant did not stand out as something separate or dangerous. It was familiar. When parts of the plant were burned or inhaled, it felt like an extension of everyday life rather than a special event. The calm it brought matched the pace of ancient evenings, when work ended with the setting sun and night stretched long and quiet. In many places, people likely inhaled cannabis smoke without even thinking of it as a separate act. Fires burned indoors for warmth and cooking. Dried plants, including cannabis, were sometimes added naturally. Smoke filled rooms softly, mixing with the scent of wood and earth. The effects were mild, unmeasured, and accepted. There was no goal to feel anything specific. If the body felt more relaxed, that was enough. As trade routes expanded, cannabis traveled farther, reaching new cultures that adapted it to their own needs. Each region developed its own relationship with the plant. Some leaned toward spiritual use. Others leaned toward healing. Some simply accepted it as part of rural life. There was no single story, no single purpose. Cannabis blended into human history quietly, shaped by local customs and slow traditions. As you imagine these ancient scenes now, picture small communities at dusk, the air cooling, fires glowing low, people sitting close, speaking softly, or not at all. The presence of cannabis is gentle and unremarkable, just another part of the evening. There is no rush, no excess, only calm repetition, night after night, year after year. As the night grows quieter for us now, let these images soften. Let them drift without needing to be remembered clearly. In the next part, we will move slowly toward how these ancient uses changed as societies became larger, more organized, and more controlled. But for now, remain still. Let the quiet deepen. Let rest continue in its own time. As centuries slowly moved forward, the presence of cannabis became more settled and familiar in many parts of the world. What had once been rare and closely tied to ritual began to blend quietly into daily life. This did not happen all at once, and it did not look the same everywhere. In some regions, cannabis remained connected to spiritual gatherings, used carefully and respectfully during moments of reflection. In other places, it became something simpler, woven into everyday routines without much ceremony. People did not speak loudly about it. There were no announcements or records meant to impress. It was simply there, part of the background of life. Imagine walking slowly through an ancient village where daily life moves at a steady, unhurried pace. People wake with the light, work with their hands, and rest when the sun lowers. In such a world, plants that changed the way the body felt were not treated as entertainment. They were treated as tools for calming the body after long labor, tools for easing discomfort, tools for quieting the mind during moments of stillness. Cannabis fit naturally into this way of thinking. It was neither praised nor feared. It was understood. In many cultures, the act of using cannabis was quiet and social rather than intense or private. Small groups gathered. Conversation stayed soft. Time slowed. There was no rush to feel anything quickly. The experience unfolded gently, just as everything else in life did. People paid attention to the setting, the time of day, and the company they kept. The plant was part of the moment, not the center of it. This approach kept its role modest and controlled. As trade routes expanded and cultures met each other, knowledge traveled without urgency. Stories were shared, seeds were exchanged, customs shifted slowly. Cannabis appeared in new lands, not as something shocking, but as something already familiar in spirit. Each culture adapted it to its own rhythm. Some embraced it openly, others kept it quiet and private. In many places, it blended into traditions so naturally that later generations could not remember a time before it existed. What is important to notice is how calm and unremarkable this spread was. There were no sudden changes to society, no loud reactions, no clear dividing lines. Cannabis did not arrive as a disruption. It arrived as a continuation of humanity's long relationship with plants that altered perception gently. It fit into evenings, gatherings, and moments of rest in the same way firelight, music, or shared silence did. As you listen now, imagine these slow centuries passing without urgency. Imagine people sitting together as the day fades, the air cooling, the body relaxing after work. Nothing dramatic happens. Nothing needs to. The plant is present. but it does not demand attention. It simply exists alongside human life, quietly and steadily. As the night grows quiet, let us pause here. Allow this long, gentle movement of history to settle. You do not need to remember details. Just let the calm rhythm remain, carrying you softly forward into rest. As time moved forward, cannabis continued its slow and gentle journey across regions. Not through sudden discovery, but through everyday human movement. Traders walked familiar routes. Families migrated. Empires rose and settled. Along with grains, fabrics, and stories, the plant traveled quietly from one place to another. There was no single moment when people decided to adopt it. Instead, it appeared gradually, blending into local customs so smoothly that its arrival often went unnoticed. In many places, it was not seen as something special or dangerous. It was simply another plant that existed, useful in small and ordinary ways. In parts of Central Asia and the Middle East, cannabis became part of daily life in subtle forms. People understood that different plants affected the body and mind in different ways. Some calmed the stomach, some eased pain. Some helped the mind slow down after long days of physical work. Cannabis fit gently into this understanding. It was not used constantly, and it was not used by everyone. It appeared during specific moments, often linked to rest, reflection, or quiet social gatherings. There was no rush and no excess. Life itself moved slowly, and the use of plants followed that pace. Across ancient trade cities, travelers encountered different customs around plants. What felt normal in one place felt unusual in another. Cannabis was sometimes viewed with curiosity, sometimes with familiarity. In some cultures, it was associated with healing. In others, it was connected to spiritual reflection. In many places, it simply existed without strong meaning at all. People accepted that nature offered many tools, and each community chose what felt appropriate for its own rhythm of life. Written records from these times are calm and observational. Ancient texts do not describe excitement or fear around cannabis. They mention it in the same way they mention other plants, quietly and without emphasis. This tells us something important. The plant was not shocking. It was not controversial. It was known, understood, and placed gently within daily routines. People respected it, but they did not obsess over it. As societies grew larger, rules slowly formed around behavior and customs. Some groups placed limits on when and how certain plants were used. These limits were often practical, not moral. Work required focus. Family life required balance. Quiet moments were set aside for rest and reflection. Cannabis, when it appeared, belonged to those quieter moments. It was not something that shaped daily survival. It was something that softened the edges of life when the work was done. Imagine these ancient evenings now. The sun has lowered, the air is still. The noise of the day has faded. People sit together, not rushing, not expecting anything special to happen. The world feels steady. In these moments, the mind slows naturally. The body rests naturally. The use of plants blends into the calm rather than interrupting it. There is no need to escape reality. Reality itself is already slow. As the night grows quiet, we begin to see that early human interaction with cannabis was never about excess or excitement. It was about rhythm, about timing, about understanding when to rest and when to move. This gentle relationship shaped how the plant remained part of human history for centuries, without drawing attention or conflict. In the next part, we will drift further forward in time and explore how changing religions, laws, and social structures slowly began to reshape how people viewed certain plants, including cannabis. For now, allow this ancient calm to remain with you. Let the story soften. Let the night continue. As centuries continued to pass, cannabis slowly settled into everyday life in many parts of the world. Not as something shocking or rebellious, but as something familiar and ordinary. In villages and small towns, people did not think of it as a substance to chase pleasure. They thought of it as a plant that belonged to the land, much like grain or herbs. It grew quietly, was harvested calmly, and was used without much ceremony. Life moved slowly, and so did the use of cannabis. There was no rush, no excitement, only routine. People worked long hours in fields or workshops, and in the evenings, they rested. In some places, cannabis smoke became part of that rest, drifting gently into the air as people sat quietly, talked softly, or simply watched the fire. In these times, cannabis was often connected to the idea of easing the body rather than changing the mind. People noticed that it helped them sleep after hard labor, helped calm aches and tired muscles, and helped quiet the mind after long days. There was no clear line between medicine and daily habit. A plant that helped the body relax was simply accepted as useful. No one measured doses carefully or tried to control experiences. They relied on familiarity and tradition, passed down slowly from one generation to the next. This slow knowledge made cannabis feel safe and predictable, not mysterious. Smoking itself was a gentle act. Pipes were simple, often handmade, sometimes carved from wood or stone. The act of lighting and inhaling was unhurried. People did not smoke alone in secret. They sat together, shared space, and stayed grounded in conversation or silence. The smoke rose slowly, mixing with the smells of earth, wood, and food. There was no pressure to feel anything special. If the body relaxed, that was enough. If the mind drifted a little, that was accepted. Nothing needed to be explained. In many cultures, cannabis became linked with nighttime. After sunset, when work stopped and the world grew quiet, people turned inward. The plant fit naturally into this rhythm. It softened the transition from activity to rest. It was not about escaping life, but about easing into stillness. Sleep came more gently, and waking felt less harsh. This connection between cannabis and rest shaped how it was viewed for centuries, as something calm and grounding rather than exciting. Over time, these quiet uses spread along trade routes. Travelers carried stories and seeds. Merchants shared habits along with goods. Cannabis moved slowly from region to region, adapting to local customs. In each place, it took on a slightly different role, but the overall feeling remained the same. It was familiar, slow, and deeply woven into daily life. There was no single moment when people decided to smoke it. It happened naturally, over generations, without announcements or rules. As you imagine this world, notice how calm everything feels. There is no urgency, no fear, and no drama. Cannabis exists quietly in the background of human life, just another plant among many, used gently and without obsession. This long period of quiet acceptance shaped how people understood it, long before laws, labels, or modern ideas appeared. As the night grows quieter now, let this slow image settle. Picture a small fire, soft voices and smoke rising gently into the dark air. Nothing is rushed. Nothing needs to happen. Let your breathing slow. Let your body rest. In the next part, we will move forward in time again, toward moments when attitudes slowly began to change, always calmly, always gently. As cannabis slowly moved through different cultures and regions, it did not always arrive as something dramatic or special. In many places, it became part of ordinary life, blending quietly into daily routines without drawing attention to itself. People did not speak loudly about it or celebrate it openly. Instead, it existed in the background, used calmly and without urgency. This quiet presence made cannabis feel familiar rather than shocking, something known and understood rather than feared. Over time, this familiarity allowed it to settle naturally into everyday life. In villages and small communities, cannabis was often used in moments of rest rather than excitement. After long hours of physical work, people gathered in calm spaces, sometimes alone and sometimes together, allowing their bodies to slow down. Cannabis was taken gently, not rushed, not consumed in large amounts. The goal was not to escape life, but to soften it. Muscles relaxed, breathing slowed, and thoughts became less sharp. These moments were not meant to stand out. They were meant to fade quietly into the rhythm of the day. Because life moved slowly in these times, people paid close attention to how their bodies felt. If something caused discomfort, it was noticed. If something brought calm, it was remembered. Cannabis earned its place not through force, but through experience. People learned how much was enough when it felt right, and when it was better avoided. This careful relationship kept its use gentle and controlled. There was no rush to take more than needed. Balance mattered more than intensity. In many cultures, elders guided this understanding. Knowledge was passed quietly from one generation to the next, not through written rules, but through observation. Younger people watched how older members of the community used plants, rested, and respected their bodies. Cannabis was part of this larger knowledge of living slowly and listening inward. It was not separate from daily life. It was woven into it gently. Religion and belief also shaped how cannabis was viewed during this time. In some traditions, it was connected to reflection and inward focus. In others, it was simply a plant among many, neither sacred nor forbidden. What mattered most was intention. If used with respect and calm, it was accepted. If used carelessly, it was discouraged. This focus on intention helped keep use quiet and grounded. As trade routes expanded and cultures met, cannabis traveled with people, adapting to new environments. Each place shaped its use differently. In some regions, it remained closely tied to rest and recovery. In others, it became part of social rituals, still calm and unhurried. Despite these differences, one thing stayed the same. Cannabis was rarely used in loud or chaotic ways. It belonged to moments of slowing down, not speeding up. As you listen now, imagine one of these quiet evenings from long ago. The work of the day is finished. The air is calm. The body feels tired but safe. A small amount of cannabis is used, not to change the world, but to soften it. Breathing slows. Thoughts drift. The moment does not demand attention. It simply exists, then fades. This gentle, everyday use is one of the most important parts of cannabis history. Long before laws, debates, or strong opinions, it lived quietly alongside human life. It was neither praised loudly nor feared deeply. It was simply known. As the night grows quiet once more, allow this calm image to soften and drift away. You do not need to remember it clearly. Let your body remain still. Let your breathing stay slow and easy. Allow rest to continue gently, in its own time. As the ancient world slowly settled into evening, the use of cannabis often moved from the open fields and busy roads into quieter, more private spaces. This was not a loud or careless habit. It was usually calm, intentional, and wrapped in routine. Imagine a small group of people sitting close together after a long day, the light fading gently, the air cooling, and the world becoming quieter by the minute. In many cultures, this was the time when people turned inward. The plant was prepared slowly, sometimes dried, sometimes warmed, sometimes mixed with other herbs, not to escape life, but to soften it. In these moments, cannabis was not separated from daily life. It was part of it. People did not see it as something shocking or dangerous. It was simply another plant that had effects, much like wine, tea, or certain roots. The act of using it was often tied to rest. After labor, after travel, after rituals, people sat still. Breathing slowed. Conversation softened. The body relaxed without hurry. These evenings were not about excess. They were about easing the edges of a hard world. Across different regions, the method changed, but the feeling remained similar. In some places, smoke was gently inhaled from simple containers made of clay or stone. In others, the plant was burned nearby, filling the air lightly, not thick or overwhelming. Sometimes it was not inhaled deeply at all, but allowed to drift around the space. The goal was not intensity. The goal was calm, a quiet shift in awareness that made the night feel slower and warmer. These practices were often shared. Alone use was less common than communal use. Sitting together created safety. People listened more than they spoke. Stories became longer. Silence became comfortable. The plant did not create chaos. It created stillness. This is important to understand because modern ideas often imagine ancient use as wild or uncontrolled. In reality, it was usually the opposite. It was careful. It was familiar. It followed patterns passed down through generations. As time passed, these calm rituals became linked to sleep. People noticed that after these quiet evenings, rest came more easily. Muscles softened, thoughts slowed. The night felt less sharp. In a world without artificial light and constant noise, this gentle slowing matched the natural rhythm of darkness. The plant did not fight the night. It moved with it. In many cultures, elders guided the use. Younger people observed before participating. This created boundaries, knowing when, how much, and with whom mattered. Cannabis was not treated as a toy. It was treated as something that could change the mind and body, and that meant it deserved respect. This respect kept its use quiet and controlled for centuries. As you imagine these ancient evenings now, let them move slowly in your mind. Picture the fire growing lower, voices becoming softer, the outside world fading into shadow. The plant's presence is gentle, almost background, like the warmth of the air or the steady breathing of those nearby. Nothing needs to happen next. There is no rush, just stillness. As the night grows quiet, let this image soften and drift away. You do not need to remember it clearly. Let it blur gently, the way ancient memories do. Allow your breathing to slow. Allow your body to rest. The story will continue, but for now, let the calm remain. As cannabis slowly moved through different regions and cultures, it often settled into daily life in a very quiet way. There were no loud announcements and no single moment when people decided it mattered. Instead, it became familiar through small, ordinary experiences. A plant grown near homes, fibers used for rope and cloth, seeds used for food, and sometimes leaves and flowers used in simple rituals meant to calm the body or quiet the mind. This everyday presence made cannabis feel less like something separate and more like part of the natural world around people. In many places, people did not think of cannabis as something that changed them in a dramatic way. It was seen as gentle, slow, and subtle. Any effects were noticed quietly, often described as warmth, ease, or a sense of calm rather than excitement. Because of this, cannabis did not stand out as dangerous or strange. It blended into daily routines, sometimes used in moments of rest after work, sometimes during quiet gatherings, and sometimes alone, without ceremony or attention. Smoking when it happened was not always the main method. In some regions, people burned plant material slowly, letting the smoke drift rather than inhaling deeply. In other places, cannabis was mixed with other herbs, creating a softer experience. These methods developed naturally over time, shaped by local customs and available materials. There was no rush to intensify the experience. Everything moved slowly, guided by curiosity rather than desire for strong effects. Cannabis was often connected to moments of rest rather than action. After long days of physical work, farming, or travel, people sought calm. They sat together, shared food, and allowed the evening to settle. In these moments, cannabis fit naturally. It did not interrupt life. It softened it. The plant became associated with slowing down, easing the body, and letting the day fade gently into night. Because of this association, cannabis was rarely treated as a problem. It did not interfere with survival or daily responsibility when used lightly. It did not demand attention. It did not create urgency. People respected it in the same way they respected other plants. Useful when treated carefully, unremarkable when ignored. This balance kept its place in society small but steady. As generations passed, knowledge about cannabis was shared quietly. Elders showed younger people how plants were grown, harvested, and stored. Stories were simple and practical, not dramatic. Cannabis was just one plant among many, known for its fibers, its seeds, and sometimes for its calming presence. This familiarity prevented fear. What is known well rarely becomes frightening. In some cultures, cannabis became part of spiritual reflection, not as a tool for visions, but as a way to create stillness. Quiet minds were valued. Calm bodies were respected. Cannabis fit into these values naturally. It was not used to escape life, but to sit with it more gently. This quiet intention shaped how people understood the plant for centuries. As you listen now, imagine these calm evenings from long ago. The work of the day finished, the air cooling, people sitting close, speaking softly, letting the night arrive. The plant is present, but not central. Life continues at its slow, steady pace. Nothing dramatic happens. Nothing needs to happen. As the night grows quiet, let us allow this gentle history to soften and fade. There is nothing to remember closely, and nothing to hold on to. Just a slow understanding of how small choices and quiet curiosity shaped human habits over time. Let your breathing remain slow. Let your body stay still. Let rest continue in its own time. As we reach this part of the story, the presence of cannabis in human life feels less mysterious and more familiar. By this time in history, people were no longer discovering the plant for the first time. Instead, they were living alongside it. In many regions, cannabis had become part of the background of daily life, not always noticed, not always spoken about, but quietly present. It was grown, stored, shared, and remembered in ways that felt ordinary rather than special. The plant no longer belonged only to rituals or medicine. It slowly became something people turned to for calm, reflection, and gentle escape from the weight of everyday life. In villages and small communities, cannabis use was often private and unspoken. There were no public announcements, no celebrations around it. People knew who used it and who did not, and that knowledge stayed quiet. An older man might sit alone after a long day of labor, breathing slowly, letting his thoughts drift. A traveler might share a small amount with companions at night, not to become wild or loud, but to soften the road's exhaustion. These moments were calm, slow, and personal. Cannabis in this way became connected to rest rather than excitement. Smoking itself as a habit developed slowly. People experimented with different ways of using the plant, learning through experience rather than instruction. Pipes were simple, often handmade. Smoke was not rushed. It was drawn in gently and released just as gently. The act itself encouraged slowness. Breathing changed. Movements softened. Conversations became quieter. Even silence felt comfortable. This is one reason cannabis stayed present across centuries. It fit naturally into slow human rhythms. There was no strong separation between medicinal use and everyday use. Pain relief, emotional calm, and quiet pleasure blended together. A person might use cannabis to ease an aching body one day and to help sleep the next. No labels were needed. It was simply part of life's small tools like herbs, teas, or warm fires at night. Because it was familiar, it was rarely dramatic. Most experiences were gentle and forgettable, not intense or overwhelming. As societies grew more complex, opinions about cannabis also began to shift. Some cultures accepted it quietly. Others became cautious. Rules were suggested, then ignored, then suggested again. Still, the plant remained. It passed from hand to hand, generation to generation, carried by travelers, traders, and migrants. Even when written history stayed silent, oral memory kept it alive. People remembered how it made them feel rather than how it was described. By this point in time, cannabis had become something deeply human, not sacred, not forbidden, but woven into the fabric of rest and reflection. It followed people into evenings, into quiet moments, into spaces where the world felt heavy and the body needed release. This quiet companionship is what allowed cannabis to survive changes in power, religion, and law. It adapted because human needs stayed the same. As you imagine these moments now, picture a calm night long ago. A small fire burns low. The day's work is finished. The air is still. Someone sits comfortably, breathing slowly, letting thoughts drift without effort. There is no rush, no goal, no expectation. Just the simple experience of being awake and calm at the same time. As the night grows quieter, let us allow this part of the story to soften. You do not need to remember the details. You do not need to judge or understand. Just let the slow rhythm of history continue. Like breathing, steady, gentle, unforced. For now, remain still. Let the quiet deepen. Let rest continue in its own time. As centuries passed, the use of cannabis continued to exist quietly alongside everyday life. Never rushing forward, never demanding attention, and rarely standing at the center of society. In many places, it was treated like other familiar plants, grown, stored, and used in calm, ordinary ways. There were no loud gatherings built around it, no clear moments where people announced its importance. Instead, it moved through time softly, passed from one generation to the next, through habit and observation. A younger person would see an elder prepare it calmly, without excitement, without secrecy, and without explanation. In this way, knowledge traveled slowly, settling into daily routines rather than standing apart from them. In some regions, cannabis was associated with rest after long days of work. Farmers, travelers, and laborers lived lives shaped by physical effort, and evenings were often quiet and slow. After the sun lowered and the work ended, people gathered in small groups or sat alone, letting the body recover. In these moments, cannabis was sometimes present, not as an escape, but as a companion to stillness. It did not replace conversation or sleep. It simply existed nearby, part of the gentle unwinding of the day. The focus remained on rest, warmth, and the comfort of familiarity. Over time, these quiet habits blended with local customs and beliefs. In some cultures, cannabis was linked to spiritual reflection, not in dramatic ceremonies, but in personal moments of calm thought. People sat quietly, breathing slowly, allowing the mind to soften. There was no pressure to feel anything special. If nothing happened, that was acceptable. The experience was not measured or judged. This attitude kept its use gentle and unforced, preventing it from becoming something that demanded attention or control. As trade routes expanded, cannabis traveled further, carried unintentionally alongside seeds, fabrics, and everyday goods. Merchants did not always see it as valuable on its own, but as something familiar enough to bring along. When it arrived in new places, it adapted again, shaped by local climate, culture, and daily life. In each place, it became something slightly different, reflecting the rhythms of the people who encountered it. This slow adaptation helped it remain part of ordinary life rather than something separate or extreme. Written records from different periods mention cannabis in simple ways, often alongside other plants. These mentions are calm and practical, lacking excitement or warning. This tells us that for long stretches of history, cannabis was not controversial. It was simply there, known and accepted, neither praised nor feared. This quiet acceptance allowed it to remain stable across generations, changing only as societies themselves changed. As you imagine these slow movements through time, notice how gentle everything feels. There is no rush, no turning point, no single moment when everything changes. Just small habits repeating themselves, year after year. This calm continuity explains why cannabis remained present for so long without drawing attention. It survived not because it was powerful, but because it fit quietly into human life. As the night grows quieter now, allow these thoughts to soften and drift away. You do not need to hold on to them. Let your body remain still. Let your breathing stay slow and easy. Allow rest to continue naturally, just as these ancient habits moved naturally through time. As time continued to move forward, cannabis slowly shifted from something rare or ritual-based into something that existed quietly alongside everyday life in many regions of the world. This change did not happen suddenly, and it did not happen everywhere at the same time. Instead, it unfolded slowly, carried by trade routes, shared knowledge, and simple human curiosity. In villages, towns, and traveling communities, people began to recognize cannabis not as something dramatic or dangerous, but as a familiar plant, with a presence that felt ordinary. It grew nearby, it was talked about casually, and it became part of the background of life rather than the center of attention. In many places, cannabis was not used for excitement or escape. It was treated with the same calm attitude given to herbs, teas, or plants used for comfort. People understood it through experience rather than explanation. They noticed how it affected the body and mind gently, often describing it as something that softened the edges of long days rather than changing reality completely. Because life itself was already slow and physically demanding, there was little desire to intensify feelings. Instead, people valued anything that brought mild calm, warmth, or ease without disturbance. In rural areas especially, cannabis existed close to work and rest. Farmers, craftsmen, and travelers lived lives shaped by daylight, seasons, and physical effort. After long hours of labor, evenings were quiet and predictable. Firelight, shared meals, and simple conversations filled the night. In these moments, cannabis sometimes appeared not as a focus, but as part of the atmosphere, much like the smoke from a hearth or the warmth of a drink. It blended into the rhythm of rest rather than standing apart from it. What is important to understand is that people did not think about cannabis in the way modern societies often do. There were no strong labels, no strict categories, and no heavy moral debates. It was neither celebrated loudly nor feared deeply. It simply existed. Knowledge about it was passed down quietly through observation and tradition. Younger generations learned by watching older ones, not through instruction, but through familiarity. This made its presence feel natural rather than intentional. In many cultures, cannabis was connected to slowing down rather than speeding up. Life moved at a gentle pace already, and anything that fit into that rhythm was accepted easily. There was no pressure to use it regularly or avoid it completely. It appeared when it appeared and faded when it faded. This flexibility allowed it to exist without tension, becoming one of many small elements that shaped daily life without controlling it. As you imagine these slow-moving societies, notice how different the relationship feels compared to modern ideas. There is no rush, no obsession, and no sense of urgency. The plant does not dominate attention. It remains in the background, part of the quiet texture of everyday existence. People wake, work, rest, and sleep. And cannabis is simply one small thread woven into that fabric, not the fabric itself. As the night grows quiet now, let this image settle gently. Picture a world where time moves slowly, where plants are known by experience rather than debate, and where calm is valued more than stimulation. Let your breathing remain soft and steady. Let your body rest without effort. The story will continue, but for now, allow this gentle moment to fade into stillness. As the centuries moved forward, cannabis slowly shifted its place in human life. What had once been an ordinary plant, growing quietly near homes and fields, began to fade from daily awareness in many parts of the world. This change did not happen suddenly. It happened slowly, through habits, laws, beliefs, and changing cultures. For a long time, people did not think deeply about cannabis at all. It was simply there. But as societies became more organized and controlled, certain plants were remembered, while others were quietly set aside. In earlier times, cannabis had never been a symbol or a statement. It was not used to stand out or to escape life. It was woven gently into routine, like many other plants used for cloth, rope, oil, or quiet personal rituals. But as written records became more formal, and rulers began to control trade and behavior more closely, everyday plant knowledge started to disappear from common memory. What was once shared freely through families and villages became less visible. In some regions, cannabis remained quietly present, passed down through tradition rather than books. Elders remembered it. Healers remembered it. Farmers remembered how it grew best in certain soil and seasons. But this knowledge was no longer celebrated or discussed openly. It lived in the background of life, soft and unspoken. Over time, fewer people recognized the plant for what it had once been. It became something vague, something half-remembered. Religious and cultural shifts also played a role. As belief systems changed, certain natural practices were embraced, while others were discouraged. Some plants were linked to approved rituals, while others were slowly pushed aside. Cannabis often fell into this quiet middle space, not forbidden at first, but no longer welcomed either. It was not dramatic. It was simply forgotten by many. As cities grew larger and life became faster, people relied less on local plants and more on controlled goods. Markets replaced gardens. Written medicine replaced oral tradition. In this process, many old practices faded gently away. Cannabis, once common and unremarkable, became unfamiliar to large parts of society. Its history did not disappear, but it became buried beneath layers of time. If you imagine this slow fading, it feels very calm. There is no conflict here, no sudden loss, just a plant slowly slipping out of focus as the world changed around it. This is how much of human history works. Things do not end loudly. They simply grow quiet. As the night grows softer now, let this idea settle gently. Human memory is long, but attention is short. Many things that once felt normal now feel distant. Cannabis is only one example of how everyday life from the past can quietly disappear, leaving behind faint traces in language, art, and old records. Let your breathing stay slow. Let the story drift without effort. In the next part, we will gently explore how modern curiosity slowly began to look backward again, trying to understand plants that had once been part of ordinary life. For now, remain still. Let the quiet continue. Let rest deepen in its own time. As centuries continued to pass, the use of cannabis slowly lost its sense of mystery and became something quietly familiar in many parts of the world. By this time, people no longer spoke about it with curiosity or fear. It was simply part of everyday life, woven gently into routine moments. In villages, towns, and traveling communities, cannabis existed alongside other natural plants, used without ceremony or excitement. It was not a symbol of rebellion or pleasure. It was simply something people knew, something they lived with, much like herbs, grains, or oils. In these periods, cannabis was often used in calm, repetitive ways. People used it after long days of physical work, when the body felt heavy and tired. Others used it during moments of rest, when the evening grew quiet and conversation slowed. There was no rush, no urgency, and no sense of excess. The plant was treated with patience. Use was slow, deliberate, and unremarkable. It did not stand out from daily life. It blended into it. Smoking, where it occurred, was usually simple. No special tools or rituals were needed. People shared smoke quietly, often sitting close together, speaking softly or not at all. Silence was comfortable. The focus was not on feeling something new, but on softening what was already there. Muscles relaxed, thoughts slowed. The body returned to a calmer rhythm. This quiet use made cannabis feel less like a substance and more like a companion to rest. Because it was so ordinary, it was rarely written about. Many habits that feel normal never make it into history books. They leave few traces. Cannabis used during these centuries often existed in this silent space, between records and stories. It was passed down through observation rather than instruction. Children saw adults use it calmly. Younger generations absorbed the behavior without questioning it. This quiet passing of habit made it feel timeless. Over time, cannabis became associated with evenings and transitions. It marked the movement from work to rest, from noise to quiet. In this way, it became part of how people understood time itself. Daylight belonged to effort. Night belonged to slowing down. Cannabis sometimes helped smooth that transition, gently guiding the body into stillness. As you imagine this period, notice how calm it feels. There is no excitement, no drama, no strong emotion, just repetition, just routine. This is how many human habits survive for long periods, not because they are celebrated, but because they fit quietly into daily life. As the night grows quiet again, allow this image to soften. Let the idea of time stretching slowly feel comfortable. In the next part, we will continue drifting forward toward moments when outside forces began to notice this quiet habit and slowly change how it was seen. For now, remain still. Let your breathing stay slow. Let rest continue in its own gentle way. As time moved forward and centuries slowly passed, the use of cannabis began to feel less like a strange ritual and more like a quiet part of everyday life in certain regions. This change did not happen suddenly. It happened the way most habits do, slowly and without much attention. In places where cannabis had been known for generations, people stopped talking about it as something special. It became familiar, something that existed alongside food, work, rest, and sleep. By this time, people no longer needed ceremonies or special moments to use cannabis. It was not always tied to religion or medicine anymore. In some homes, it was treated like a calming plant, used at the end of the day when work was done and the body felt tired. After long hours of labor in fields, workshops, or travel, people looked for ways to rest their minds and bodies. Cannabis quietly filled that space. It was not loud. It was not celebrated. It was simply there, In many regions, people learned through experience how much was enough. Too much brought discomfort, too little did nothing at all. Over time, this balance became part of daily knowledge, passed down through families and communities. There were no written rules, no measurements, and no formal teaching. People watched each other. They learned by observing how elders behaved. This made the habit feel natural and controlled rather than dangerous or exciting. Smoking in particular became more common as people discovered that burning dried plants released effects faster than eating or drinking them. The act itself was simple: a small fire, a calm moment, slow breathing. This method fit well with quiet evenings and long nights. Smoke rose and disappeared, leaving behind stillness. For people living without artificial light, evenings were already slow. Cannabis fit into that rhythm without changing it. What is important to notice here is that cannabis was not always used to escape life. In many cases, it was used to soften it. Life in the past was physically demanding and mentally repetitive. Days were long. Comfort was limited. Sleep was not always easy. Cannabis helped some people relax their muscles, slow their thoughts, and ease into rest. It became part of the transition from day to night. In trading regions, knowledge of smoking spread gently from one culture to another. Travelers noticed habits in foreign lands and carried them home. Sometimes the plant arrived first. Sometimes the method arrived first. Over many generations, these small exchanges shaped how people understood cannabis. It was no longer seen as exotic. It became familiar, even ordinary. There was also a social side to this habit. In some places, small groups gathered quietly to sit together, talk slowly, or simply share silence. Cannabis did not always create laughter or excitement. Often, it created calm presence. People sat closer. Voices became softer. Movements slowed. In a world without constant noise, this kind of shared quiet had value. As societies grew larger and more complex, authorities sometimes ignored cannabis completely. It was not disruptive enough to cause concern. It did not always lead to violence or chaos. Because of this, it existed in the background of daily life, rarely written about and rarely discussed in official records. This silence is why it can feel mysterious today. But in its own time, it was simply one of many plants people lived alongside. As you listen now, imagine an evening many centuries ago. The sun is set, work is finished, the air is still. Somewhere nearby, a small fire burns low. A few people sit quietly, breathing slowly, letting the day fade away. Nothing dramatic is happening. Nothing needs to happen. Time moves gently, without pressure. As the night grows quiet, let us pause here. Let the story rest for a moment, just as people once did at the end of long days. The next part will continue this slow journey, exploring how changing laws, beliefs, and fears slowly reshaped how the world looked at this ancient plant. For now, remain still. Let the quiet deepen, let rest continue in its own time. By the time cannabis had been known for many centuries, it no longer felt new or mysterious to many ancient communities. It became something familiar, woven quietly into daily life, rather than spoken about loudly. In many places, people did not think of it as something separate or special. It was simply one of many plants that existed around them, growing in fields, near homes, or along paths used every day. Some people walked past it without giving it much thought, while others knew its smell, its fibers, and the calm feeling it could bring. This quiet familiarity meant that cannabis use often happened without ceremony, without records, and without much attention. In villages and small settlements, life followed slow and predictable rhythms. People woke with the light, worked with their hands, and rested when the day ended. In this setting, cannabis was sometimes used in the same calm way as food, drink, or rest. After long hours of physical labor, some people sat quietly near fires, sharing stories, warmth, and silence. The plant was not always smoked in the way we imagine today. Sometimes it was burned gently, allowing the smoke to drift softly through the air. Sometimes it was mixed with other plants. The goal was not excitement, but easing the body and calming the mind. For many ancient people, altered states were not seen as dangerous or strange. They were part of human experience. Sleep, dreams, prayer, meditation, and quiet reflection were all ways the mind could change its pace. Cannabis fit into this understanding naturally. It slowed thoughts, softened worries, and made long evenings feel shorter. There was no rush to label the experience or explain it. People simply noticed how they felt and accepted it as part of life. Because writing was rare and often reserved for important events, laws, or rulers, everyday habits like this were rarely recorded. This is why modern history sometimes struggles to find clear evidence. Cannabis use did not always leave strong traces. It happened in homes, in quiet gatherings, and in private moments. These experiences were lived, not written. Knowledge passed from one generation to the next through observation rather than instruction. Younger people watched elders and learned when something was used and when it was not. In some cultures, the plant became associated with rest at the end of the day. After meals were eaten and tools were set aside, people gathered in low light. Fires burned slowly. Conversations became softer. In these moments, cannabis smoke sometimes joined the air, blending with the smell of wood and earth. The experience was gentle. No one hurried it. Time felt slower, and the night felt longer and calmer. As societies grew and trade increased, these quiet habits traveled too. People moved from place to place, bringing seeds, stories, and customs with them. Cannabis followed these paths without drawing attention. It did not need promotion or explanation. It spread simply because it was useful, familiar, and easy to grow. In this way, the plant became part of human history not through grand events, but through ordinary evenings and shared silence. As you imagine these ancient nights, try to picture how normal and unremarkable it felt to those living them. There was no idea that this was something controversial or important. It was just part of the world, like grain, fire, or sleep. The calm it brought blended naturally into the rhythm of life, leaving little behind for historians to find, but much for people to feel. As the night grows quieter now, let this image soften in your mind. Let the slow pace of ancient life settle gently around you. There is nothing here to analyze or remember, just a feeling of time moving slowly, and people resting at the end of long days. As the centuries slowly moved forward, the use of cannabis became something quiet and ordinary in many places, not dramatic or celebrated, but simply present in the background of daily life. For most people, it was not about escaping reality or seeking excitement. It was woven gently into routines that were already slow and repetitive. Farmers, travelers, healers, and laborers lived lives shaped by long hours and physical effort. Small moments of rest mattered deeply, and substances that softened the body or slowed the mind were treated with calm acceptance rather than curiosity or fear. Cannabis was one of many plants known for its subtle effects, not a central focus, but a quiet companion to rest. In villages and small towns, people passed knowledge softly, without writing it down. Older generations shared what they knew through habit rather than instruction. There were no strict rules or ceremonies for use in most places. Instead, it appeared naturally in moments of pause, at the end of a long day, or during periods of waiting. Life itself moved slowly, so anything that further slowed perception blended easily into the rhythm of everyday existence. Time was not measured closely, and the mind was not pushed to stay alert after work ended. Cannabis, when present, did not interrupt life. It followed it. People still rose with the sun. They still worked, cooked, walked, and slept in the same patterns. The plant did not promise transformation. It offered familiarity. In a world without constant stimulation, its effects were subtle, almost unremarkable. This is why historical records often mention it quietly, without emphasis. It was not something to announce. It was something to live alongside. As trade routes expanded, ideas moved gently between cultures. Knowledge of plants traveled the same way as stories and habits, slowly and unevenly. Some communities adopted new uses. Others ignored them. There was no urgency, no rush to change. The world was large and life was already full of waiting. Cannabis remained part of this slow movement, drifting across regions without reshaping them. As you imagine this time, notice how calm it feels. There is no excitement here, no rebellion, just people living day after day, finding small ways to soften the edges of long hours. The plant exists, but it does not dominate attention. It rests quietly in the background, just like countless other details of historical life that never demanded to be noticed. As the night grows quieter now, allow this image to fade gently. You do not need to remember names, dates, or places. Let the idea of slow time settle in your mind. Let your breathing remain steady. Let your body feel heavy and still. Rest continues just as it always has, moving forward without effort. As centuries continued to pass, the presence of cannabis in human life became quieter and more ordinary. In many regions, it was no longer a mystery plant or a rare substance connected only to ritual or medicine. It slowly became part of daily existence, used in simple and familiar ways. People no longer spoke about it with excitement or fear. Instead, it rested quietly in the background of life, like many other plants that humans had learned to live with over time. This quiet acceptance is one of the most important stages in the long history of cannabis, because it shows how deeply it had blended into everyday human routines. In villages and towns across parts of Asia, the Middle East, and beyond, cannabis plants grew near homes, fields, and paths. People recognized them easily. They knew their shape, their smell, and the way they dried in the sun. There was no sense of secrecy around the plant in many places. It was treated as something natural, something that had always been there. Older generations passed their knowledge to younger ones calmly, without instruction manuals or strict rules, just through observation and habit. A person learned by watching, listening, and being part of the community. At this stage, cannabis use was often gentle and slow. It was not about strong effects or intense experiences. It was about easing the body, calming the mind, or passing quiet moments at the end of the day. People lived lives filled with physical work, long hours, and simple routines. Any plant that helped soften the edges of that life was welcomed quietly. Cannabis fit into that space without demanding attention. It did not interrupt life. It flowed alongside it. In some cultures, cannabis was associated with rest rather than activity. It appeared during evenings after work was done when the body needed to slow down. People sat together, spoke softly, or remained silent, letting the day fade away. There was no rush. There were no expectations. The experience was slow and shared, not dramatic or intense. This gentle rhythm matched the pace of pre-modern life, where time moved differently and patience was natural. Religious and spiritual views during this period were also calm and varied. Some traditions continued to see cannabis as a gift from nature, something placed on the earth for human use. Others viewed it simply as another plant, neither sacred nor forbidden. Because belief systems were deeply tied to daily life, cannabis did not stand out as something separate or dangerous. It existed within the same moral space as food, drink, and herbs, judged by moderation rather than fear. Importantly, this long period of quiet use left very few dramatic records. There were no loud debates or written arguments about cannabis in many societies. And because of that, modern people sometimes assume it was not important. But its importance lies exactly in this silence. Cannabis had become normal, and when something becomes normal, people stop writing about it. They simply live with it. As you listen now, imagine these calm evenings from long ago. A small group of people sitting together, the air warm, the day finished, no urgency in their movements. The world feels steady. Time feels wide. Cannabis is not the center of attention. It is simply there, part of the background of human life, as quiet as the stars above. As the night grows quieter now, let this image soften and fade. You do not need to hold on to it. As the centuries slowly moved forward, the use of cannabis became something quiet and ordinary in many places, not dramatic or celebrated, but simply present in the background of daily life. For most people, it was not about escaping reality or seeking excitement. It was woven gently into routines that were already slow and repetitive. Farmers, travelers, healers, and laborers lived lives shaped by long hours and physical effort. Small moments of rest mattered deeply, and substances that softened the body or slowed the mind were treated with calm acceptance rather than curiosity or fear. Cannabis was one of many plants known for its subtle effects, not a central focus, but a quiet companion to rest. In villages and small towns, people passed knowledge softly, without writing it down. Older generations shared what they knew through habit rather than instruction. There were no strict rules or ceremonies for use in most places. Instead, it appeared naturally in moments of pause, at the end of a long day, or during periods of waiting. Life itself moved slowly, so anything that further slowed perception blended easily into the rhythm of everyday existence. Time was not measured closely, and the mind was not pushed to stay alert after work ended. Cannabis, when present, did not interrupt life. It followed it. People still rose with the sun. They still worked, cooked, walked, and slept in the same patterns. The plant did not promise transformation. It offered familiarity. In a world without constant stimulation, its effects were subtle, almost unremarkable. This is why historical records often mention it quietly, without emphasis. It was not something to announce. It was something to live alongside. As trade routes expanded, ideas moved gently between cultures. Knowledge of plants traveled the same way as stories and habits, slowly and unevenly. Some communities adopted new uses. Others ignored them. There was no urgency, no rush to change. The world was large and life was already full of waiting. Cannabis remained part of this slow movement, drifting across regions without reshaping them. As you imagine this time, notice how calm it feels. There is no excitement here, no rebellion, just people living day after day, finding small ways to soften the edges of long hours. The plant exists, but it does not dominate attention. It rests quietly in the background, just like countless other details of historical life that never demanded to be noticed. As the night grows quieter now, allow this image to fade gently. You do not need to remember names, dates, or places. Let the idea of slow time settle in your mind. Let your breathing remain steady. Let your body feel heavy and still. Rest continues just as it always has, moving forward without effort. As centuries continued to pass, the presence of cannabis in human life became quieter and more ordinary. In many regions, it was no longer a mystery plant or a rare substance connected only to ritual or medicine. It slowly became part of daily existence, used in simple and familiar ways. People no longer spoke about it with excitement or fear. Instead, it rested quietly in the background of life, like many other plants that humans had learned to live with over time. This quiet acceptance is one of the most important stages in the long history of cannabis, because it shows how deeply it had blended into everyday human routines. In villages and towns across parts of Asia, the Middle East, and beyond, cannabis plants grew near homes, fields, and paths. People recognized them easily. They knew their shape, their smell, and the way they dried in the sun. There was no sense of secrecy around the plant in many places. It was treated as something natural, something that had always been there. Older generations passed their knowledge to younger ones calmly, without instruction manuals or strict rules, just through observation and habit. A person learned by watching, listening, and being part of the community. At this stage, cannabis use was often gentle and slow. It was not about strong effects or intense experiences. It was about easing the body, calming the mind, or passing quiet moments at the end of the day. People lived lives filled with physical work, long hours, and simple routines. Any plant that helped soften the edges of that life was welcomed quietly. Cannabis fit into that space without demanding attention. It did not interrupt life. It flowed alongside it. In some cultures, cannabis was associated with rest rather than activity. It appeared during evenings after work was done, when the body needed to slow down. People sat together, spoke softly, or remained silent, letting the day fade away. There was no rush. There were no expectations. The experience was slow and shared, not dramatic or intense. This gentle rhythm matched the pace of pre-modern life, where time moved differently and patience was natural. Religious and spiritual views during this period were also calm and varied. Some traditions continued to see cannabis as a gift from nature, something placed on the earth for human use. Others viewed it simply as another plant, neither sacred nor forbidden. Because belief systems were deeply tied to daily life, cannabis did not stand out as something separate or dangerous. It existed within the same moral space as food, drink, and herbs, judged by moderation rather than fear. Importantly, this long period of quiet use left very few dramatic records. There were no loud debates or written arguments about cannabis in many societies. And because of that, modern people sometimes assume it was not important. But its importance lies exactly in this silence. Cannabis had become normal, and when something becomes normal, people stop writing about it. They simply live with it. As you listen now, imagine these calm evenings from long ago. A small group of people sitting together, the air warm, the day finished, no urgency in their movements. The world feels steady. Time feels wide. Cannabis is not the center of attention. It is simply there, part of the background of human life, as quiet as the stars above. As the night grows quieter now, let this image soften and fade. You do not need to hold on to it. Let your body remain still. Let your breathing stay slow and gentle. Allow rest to continue in its own calm rhythm, just as it has done for humans across thousands of years. As time moved gently forward, the use of cannabis settled into daily life in many parts of the world in a quiet and ordinary way. It was not always something special or dramatic. In many places, it became part of familiar routines, known but not loudly discussed. People understood it as one of many plants around them, growing in fields, near homes, or along trade routes. Knowledge about it was passed softly, through observation rather than instruction, and through habit rather than ceremony. This quiet presence allowed the plant to exist without drawing much attention, blending into everyday life. In villages and small communities, cannabis was often associated with calm moments rather than excitement. After long days of physical work, people gathered, rested, talked slowly, and allowed the body to relax. The plant was not always smoked, and when it was done gently without urgency. There were no strict rules written down, only shared understanding. These moments were about slowing down, not escaping. The atmosphere remained peaceful, shaped by familiar faces and steady routines. Over time, stories and beliefs formed around these quiet practices. Some people believed the plant helped with rest. Others saw it as a companion during reflection or prayer, and some simply saw it as another part of nature. These beliefs were rarely argued about. They existed side by side, changing slightly from region to region. Because of this, cannabis did not belong to one single culture or purpose. It adapted quietly, shaped by local customs and needs. Trade routes continued to spread both the plant and the stories connected to it. Merchants carried seeds along with spices, fabrics, and tools. With each new place, cannabis took on a slightly different role. In some regions, it remained rare and symbolic, while in others it became common and familiar. This slow movement across borders happened without announcements or records, making its history feel soft and layered rather than clear and direct. As you listen now, imagine these calm scenes unfolding slowly. Small groups resting after work, quiet conversations, the steady rhythm of daily life continuing without interruption. Nothing hurried, nothing dramatic. Just people living within their environment, using what was around them in ways that felt natural and accepted. As the night grows quieter, allow this image to soften and fade. You do not need to remember the details. Let the story drift gently into the background. Let your breathing remain slow and easy. Let rest continue in its own calm rhythm. As time moved slowly forward, the use of cannabis became something that blended gently into everyday life in many parts of the world. It was no longer only a ritual plant or a medicine used by healers and elders. In some cultures, it became a familiar presence known quietly by families and communities. People did not speak about it loudly or dramatically. It existed in the background of daily routines, much like herbs used for tea or oils used for the body. This quiet acceptance shaped how the plant was understood, not as something shocking, but as something ordinary. In villages and towns, cannabis was often prepared in simple ways. Leaves were dried carefully. Flowers were handled gently. Smoke was not rushed or forced. People sat, waited, and allowed time to slow down. These moments were not about escaping life, but about easing into it. After long days of work in fields, workshops, or homes, this pause allowed bodies to relax and minds to soften. The experience was slow, steady, and calm, fitting naturally into the rhythm of pre-modern life. There were no strict labels or categories for the experience. People did not ask whether it was good or bad in the way modern societies do. Instead, they observed how it made them feel. If it helped with pain, sleep, or quiet thought, it was valued. If it caused discomfort, it was avoided. This simple relationship kept usage grounded and limited by experience rather than rules. Knowledge passed quietly from one generation to the next, through observation and trust. In many places, smoking was not even the main method at first. Some cultures burned the plant as incense. Others mixed it into drinks or food. Smoke, when used, was often gentle and shared, never hurried. People sat together listening to stories, watching firelight, or simply resting. These shared moments strengthened social bonds. Cannabis use became less about the plant itself and more about the space it created for rest and connection. As trade routes expanded, knowledge traveled slowly. Travelers carried stories of different plants and customs from distant lands. Cannabis moved with them, crossing borders quietly. In each new place, it adapted to local traditions. Some societies welcomed it, others used it cautiously, but rarely was it seen as shocking. It arrived softly, blending into existing habits rather than replacing them. Over time, these calm traditions shaped how the plant survived through centuries. It was not protected by laws or promoted by authorities. It survived because people found simple uses for it in daily life. Relief from pain, help with sleep, a quiet moment at the end of the day. These needs did not change even as societies slowly evolved. As you listen now, imagine one of these quiet evenings from long ago. The day has ended. Work is done. The air is still. People sit close, speaking softly or not speaking at all. Smoke rises slowly, disappearing into the dark. There is no rush, no expectation, just time moving gently forward. As the night grows quiet, let us pause here. Allow this image to fade slowly, like smoke drifting into the air. In the next part, we will move closer to the moment when changing societies began to view cannabis differently, slowly shifting from quiet tradition to something more questioned and controlled. For now, remain still. Let your breathing stay slow. Let rest continue in its own gentle way. As time moved forward into later centuries, the use of cannabis slowly became something ordinary rather than mysterious. In many places, it was no longer treated as a special substance meant only for rituals or healing. Instead, it blended quietly into daily life. People did not talk loudly about it, and they did not make it dramatic. It was simply there, used in small, calm ways, often at the end of a long day. Farmers, laborers, travelers, and craftspeople sometimes used cannabis the way others used herbal teas or simple wine, as a way to rest the body and slow the mind after work. There was no rush, no excess, and no idea of escaping reality. The goal was comfort, not intensity. In villages and small communities, cannabis use often happened in familiar spaces. A quiet room, a shaded outdoor area, or a place near a fire. People sat, talked softly, or simply remained silent together. The experience was slow and gentle. There was no pressure to feel anything special. If the body relaxed, that was enough. If the mind became quiet, that was welcomed. If nothing noticeable happened, that was also fine. This calm attitude prevented fear and excess. Cannabis was not treated as powerful or dangerous. It was treated as mild and manageable. Older generations often guided younger ones in how to use it carefully. Small amounts were preferred. Too much was seen as unnecessary and uncomfortable. Balance mattered more than strength. This guidance helped keep cannabis from becoming overwhelming. It stayed connected to rest, sleep, and quiet reflection rather than excitement or loss of control. Because of this, it rarely caused conflict within communities. As trade routes expanded and cultures mixed, knowledge about cannabis continued to spread slowly. Each region adapted it to its own habits. Some mixed it with food, some burned it gently, some used it only at night. There was no single correct way. What mattered was that it fit into the rhythm of life rather than interrupting it. Cannabis followed people's routines instead of changing them. As you imagine this period now, notice how calm it feels. There is no drama, no urgency, and no strong emotion around use. Just people resting, breathing slowly, and letting the day fade away. This quiet acceptance explains why cannabis stayed part of human history for so long. It did not demand attention. It did not ask to be celebrated. It simply existed alongside everyday life. As the night grows quiet now, allow this image to soften and drift away. You do not need to remember details. Let the calm remain. Let your breathing stay slow. Let rest continue gently in its own time. As the story slowly moves through time, one gentle truth becomes clear. Even when laws changed, beliefs shifted, and societies transformed, the quiet relationship between humans and this plant never fully disappeared. It did not always stay in the open. Sometimes it moved into homes, sometimes into rituals, sometimes into silence. But it remained, carried softly from one generation to the next, often without written records, without loud discussion, and without urgency. In many rural areas across Asia, the Middle East, and parts of Europe, cannabis was not spoken about as something separate or dramatic. It was simply part of life, a plant grown near others, a smell known but not announced, an experience understood without needing explanation. Elders passed down knowledge quietly, teaching younger generations how to respect the plant rather than fear it. This knowledge was shared in calm ways, often during evenings, after work was done, when the body was tired and the mind ready to rest. Smoking, when it happened, was rarely rushed. Pipes were simple, Smoke was slow. The act itself was not about escape, but about easing the body and calming the mind. People sat, they breathed, they waited. There was no sense of urgency. The experience unfolded at the same pace as the night itself. This slow rhythm made the plant feel less like a substance and more like a companion to stillness. In these quiet traditions, cannabis was not always smoked. Sometimes it was burned gently nearby. Sometimes it was mixed with herbs. Sometimes it was used only on certain nights, after certain kinds of work, or during specific seasons. This careful timing reflected respect rather than indulgence. People understood that too much disrupted balance, while just enough supported rest. As societies became more controlled and regulated, these traditions did not vanish. They simply became quieter. Families continued them behind closed doors. Small communities preserved them without writing them down. Songs, stories, and shared evenings carried memory when books did not. The plant lived not in history books but in habit and routine. As you listen now, imagine one of these evenings. The day is over. The body feels heavy. The air is still. Someone prepares a small pipe or a simple bundle of herbs. No one speaks loudly. No one rushes. The moment is calm, almost unnoticeable. The smoke rises slowly, blending into the darkness. The night accepts it without judgment. This is how cannabis survived time. Not through rebellion, not through excitement, but through quiet repetition, through people seeking calm, rest, and gentle relief after long days, through nights that asked for nothing except stillness. As the night grows quieter now, let this image soften and fade. You do not need to hold on to it. Let your breathing slow. Let your body remain still. In the next part, we will gently move toward how modern times rediscovered and reinterpreted these ancient habits, always calmly, always slowly. For now, remain at rest. Let the story pause here, the way the night itself often does. As cannabis slowly became part of everyday life in different ancient cultures, it was most often used in calm and ordinary moments rather than dramatic ones. There were no loud gatherings or wild celebrations attached to it. Instead, it appeared quietly in the background of daily routines. Imagine an evening long ago, after work was finished and the light was fading. The air was still. People sat close together, resting their bodies after long hours of labor. In these moments, plants like cannabis were sometimes used gently, not to escape life, but to soften it. The experience was slow and mild, blending naturally into rest, conversation, and quiet reflection. In many places, cannabis was not smoked in the way modern people imagine. Burning leaves and breathing deeply was not always the main method. Sometimes the plant was heated lightly, mixed with other herbs, or placed near warmth so its scent filled the air. Sometimes it was eaten in small amounts or added to drinks. The goal was not intensity. The goal was calm. The effects were subtle, often barely noticeable, creating a sense of relaxation rather than excitement. People did not talk about being high. They talked about feeling settled, eased, and less tense. These moments often happened at the end of the day. After farming, crafting, or traveling, the body needed rest. Muscles were sore. Hands were tired. The mind carried worries. Cannabis, when used, fit naturally into this quiet transition from activity to stillness. It was not separate from life. It was part of slowing down. Just as people sat near firelight or listened to familiar sounds of the night, they allowed the plant to gently change how the body felt, making rest come more easily. There was also a social softness to these moments. People sat together, not alone. Conversation moved slowly. Stories were shared without urgency. Silence was comfortable. The plant did not push people outward. It drew them inward. It encouraged listening more than speaking. This made it especially suitable for nighttime, when energy naturally faded and the world became quiet. In this way, cannabis blended into the rhythm of evening rather than disrupting it. Importantly, these uses were not daily for everyone. Many people never used it at all. For others, it was occasional, reserved for certain times or needs. It was not a habit in the modern sense. It was a tool, taken out gently and put away again without obsession. This kept its role small and controlled. Because of this, it rarely defined a person's identity. It was simply one plant among many, used when helpful and ignored when not. As centuries passed, these quiet traditions continued, changing slowly from place to place. The way people used cannabis reflected how they lived overall. Life was slower. Evenings were longer. There was no rush to feel something stronger or faster. Everything unfolded at the pace of the body and the sun. Cannabis followed that pace, never leading, always following. As you listen now, imagine sitting in one of those ancient evenings. The day is finished. The light is low. The air is calm. Nothing needs to happen. There is nowhere to go. Whether a plant is present or not, the feeling is the same. The body is allowed to rest. The mind is allowed to soften. The night opens gently without demand. As the night grows quiet, let these images fade slowly. You do not need to remember them. Just let them drift, the way ancient evenings always did. As the story of cannabis moves closer to the present, it becomes softer and more ordinary, almost blending into the background of daily life. After centuries of ritual use, medicine, trade, and quiet enjoyment, cannabis did not disappear. It simply settled into familiar routines, changing form but not purpose. In many places, people no longer spoke about it openly, yet its presence remained steady, woven into simple moments rather than grand ceremonies. The plant became part of evenings, conversations, and private reflection, not as something dramatic but as something familiar. In villages, towns, and growing cities, people continued to experience altered states in gentle ways. They gathered after work, shared stories, and let the mind slow down. The reasons were rarely complex. People wanted rest, relief, and a moment of calm. Life was demanding, and the human desire to soften the edges of the day never changed. Cannabis fit quietly into that desire, offering a pause without urgency. No one rushed toward it. It was taken slowly, patiently, and often with respect learned over generations. As societies modernized, the language around cannabis shifted, but the experience remained similar. People noticed the same effects their ancestors had noticed long before. Thoughts became looser. Time felt slower. Sensations softened. These feelings were not new discoveries. They were echoes of ancient experiences repeated again and again across centuries. The body responded the same way it always had, reminding us that human biology changes far more slowly than culture. In private homes, quiet rooms, and small gatherings, cannabis continued its role as a companion to stillness. It was not always smoked. Sometimes it was eaten, brewed, or inhaled in other gentle ways. The method mattered less than the intention. People sought relaxation, reflection, and a gentle shift away from the sharpness of everyday life. This intention connected them directly to the distant past, even if they did not realize it. As you listen now, imagine how familiar this pattern feels. The desire to slow down, to soften the mind, and to rest deeply is timeless. Long before modern labels and laws, humans were already exploring these moments of quiet awareness. Cannabis did not create something new. It simply helped people access a state the body already understood. As the night grows quiet, let this part of the story fade gently. There is nothing to remember or analyze. Just allow the calm rhythm of human history to continue moving softly in the background, just as your breathing remains slow and steady. As time moved forward and human society slowly settled into routines, the use of this ancient plant became less about ceremony and more about everyday life. In many places, cannabis was no longer treated as something rare or mysterious. It became familiar. People knew its smell, its feel, and its effects in gentle ways. It was not always smoked, and it was not always used to escape reality. Often, it was simply part of the rhythm of daily life, woven quietly into moments of rest, pain relief, or long evenings after work. Imagine a small village somewhere along an old trade route. The sun has already gone down and the day's work is finished. Hands are tired, backs are sore. People sit together, not rushing, not talking loudly. Someone prepares dried leaves or resin, not with excitement, but with familiarity. The act is slow and practiced. No one is counting time. No one is seeking intensity. The goal is calm. The goal is ease. The plant is used the same way people use warmth, or quiet, or food. It helps the body soften after a long day. In these moments, cannabis was not separate from life. It was not labeled good or bad. It was simply known. Elders understood how much was enough. Younger people learned by watching, not by being told. Overuse was discouraged, not through punishment, but through shared experience. Balance mattered more than excess. The plant had a place, and that place was limited and understood. In many cultures, this quiet use continued for centuries. It was used to help sleep come more easily. It was used to dull pain when nothing else was available. It was used to calm the mind during long winters or difficult seasons. People did not chase stronger effects. They respected the plant's presence and its limits. This respect kept its use slow and controlled. As societies grew more complex, attitudes began to shift. Written laws appeared. Religious rules became stricter. Power structures grew. What was once normal began to be questioned. Some leaders feared loss of control. Some institutions disliked anything that softened authority or encouraged inward focus. Slowly, the plant that had once been ordinary began to feel suspicious to those in power. But even then, its use did not disappear. It moved quietly. It stayed in homes, in small groups, in private moments. People continued to use it the way their ancestors had. Not loudly, not proudly, but calmly. Knowledge passed down through families rather than books. The plant survived because it met real human needs that did not go away. As you listen now, imagine these quiet evenings repeating across centuries. Different languages, different lands, the same human body, the same need for rest, relief, and calm. Cannabis did not begin as a trend. It did not begin as rebellion. It began as a response to being human in a difficult world. This long history reminds us that human relationships with plants are rarely simple. They are shaped by culture, power, fear, and need. Cannabis has been many things across time, but most often, it was something small and quiet, used by ordinary people trying to soften the edges of life. As the night grows quieter now, allow this long story to slow even further. You do not need to remember dates or places. Let the images fade gently. What remains is the understanding that humans have always searched for calm, for relief, for a way to rest their bodies and minds. Let your breathing stay slow. Let your body remain heavy. Let the story drift away. In the next and final part, we will gently bring this journey to rest, reflecting softly on what this long history tells us about human nature itself. For now, remain still. Let the quiet deepen. Let rest continue in its own time. As we reach the end of this long and gentle journey, it becomes clear that the story of people smoking weed is not a story of one moment or one place. It is a slow human story that stretches across thousands of years, shaped by nature, culture, curiosity, and daily life. Long before modern ideas, laws, or labels existed, people interacted with plants simply because those plants were around them. They observed how plants smelled, how they burned, how they made the body feel, and how they changed quiet moments at the end of the day. There was no clear beginning marked by a date or a name. Instead, there was a gradual discovery, repeated again and again by different people in different lands across long stretches of time. For ancient people, cannabis was never separated into strict categories the way it is today. It was not only a plant to smoke. It was rope, cloth, medicine, oil, seed, and sometimes smoke drifting softly into the air during calm moments. Smoking itself was not always the goal. It happened naturally as people burned plants for warmth, ritual, or relaxation. Over time, they noticed patterns. Certain plants changed the way the body felt. Certain smells brought calm. Certain moments felt different when smoke filled the air. These observations were quiet and practical, not dramatic or rebellious. As civilizations grew, these practices moved gently through trade routes, shared knowledge, and everyday habits. From ancient Asia to the Middle East, from Africa to Europe, people carried seeds, stories, and customs with them. Cannabis became part of local traditions in small, almost invisible ways. A healer might burn it. A traveler might carry it. A worker might use it at night to ease the body after long hours. No one thought of it as a global story. It was simply part of life. Later, as societies became more organized and controlled, the way people viewed plants began to change. Rules were written, beliefs hardened. Some practices were accepted, others questioned, and some pushed into the shadows. Smoking weed slowly moved from being an ordinary human habit to something debated, regulated, or hidden. But even then, the habit itself did not disappear. It continued quietly, passed from one generation to another, often without written record, surviving in small daily moments rather than official history books. What makes this story suitable for the night is how human it is. There is no single hero, no final invention, no sudden revolution. There is only curiosity, repetition, and time. People noticed something, they tried it, they shared it, and then life moved on. The plant stayed, The habit shifted, the meanings changed, but the slow rhythm remained. As you lie here listening, imagine all those quiet moments across history. A fire burning softly, smoke rising into the night air, people sitting, resting, talking slowly, or simply watching the flames. No rush, no explanation needed. Just time passing gently, the way it always has. This is where the story can rest, not with an answer carved in stone, but with an understanding that many human habits begin quietly, live quietly, and continue quietly, shaped by culture and time rather than a single moment. As the night grows even quieter now, allow this long story to fade into the background. You do not need to remember the details. Let them drift away like smoke into the dark. Stay still. Breathe slowly. Let your body sink deeper into rest. The story is complete. The night remains. Good night and sleep well.